Folks, we are counting down 30 absurdly wrong things people know about Jesus. And by know and knowing, we mean spuriously familiar knowing. Knowing that really isn't knowledge, just spuriously informed belief. This is number 1. Everyone knows that Jesus was popular. Ask any Sunday school instructor, Bible teacher, or catechist. Jesus drew humongous crowds. Isn't that what the Gospels tell us? Surely. Massive groups of people gathered to see Jesus, to be fed by Jesus, to be healed by him, to greet Jesus when he triumphantly entered Jerusalem, and to arrest Jesus in the dead of night as a great threat, threatening to overturn their world, and soon after to call for his crucifixion. Before Jesus was arrested, the Gospels consistently present him as a massively famous and popular figure, even after Jesus becomes infamous. Several hundred years after their composition, when the Gospels got canonized in the 4th century, an elite imperial identity theft bearing the name Jesus, indeed, became very famous and very popular. At that time, the thing to join was Christendom, the political religion of Emperor Constantine. This superpopularity of a made-over Jesus, now Roman King of Kings and Lord of Lords, easily got read back into the 1st century Gospel stories. And ever since that time, Christians have not shaken the habit of imagining Jesus as being insanely popular among all peoples, cultures, genders, and ages. Everywhere. With the notable exception, of course, of some diabolically evil types, distorted caricatures often employed for grotesque anti-Jewish genocidal hatred. Many American Christians adore the culturally congenial Jesus called Great One. Why wouldn't they? Americans delight in being called great and in great things, right? If Jesus wasn't great, well, he's not really worth our time, is he? Americans dig greatness. Make America great again! Make it great! Except not great in most ways for women, homosexuals, minorities, indigenous peoples, and pretty much anyone who isn't a wealthy white male. Make it great again with our romanticized 1950s sense of greatness, rather than actually what was truly good and great about that time, namely strong labor unions and healthy workforce where labor is given human dignity. But I digress. While it is true that we American Christians are not Christian Rome, bastion of imperial cruelty, don't be mistaken. We are just like Rome in our worship of the false god of imperial cruelty, omnipotence. That worship, sadly, never goes out of style.
Clinton, how dare you speak about human rights while Palestinians are being murdered in the name of protections of human rights?
Israel is not defending itself. It's a genocide that you're paying for. And then you talk about women's rights? Are you serious? What women's right are you talking about? There's a genocide committed by the USA, the government that you're standing under, and now you're speaking cinema for peace. We are watching a cinema of genocide.
Everybody's free to vote.
Today in our culture, Democrats and Republicans both lavish this cruel god omnipotence with every possible tribute and praise. Still, it is done in the American style, where this god is known as the winner, the achiever, the numero uno, the GOAT, the best of the best. And like how Constantine's political religion kept worshipping cruel omnipotence as Jesus, sounds a lot like Zeus, doesn't it? So too we have costumed this monster up as something pleasant and agreeable to our American cultural values. And also we have bestowed on him the name below every other name, Yeshua, or Jesus, the peasant day laborer turned folk healer and crucified shame.
Absolutely no humility in any of Constantine's self-fashioning. I mean, he's very happy to have a 40-foot tall statue of himself looming over this space in the center of Rome. He allows cities in the north of Italy to erect cults to his family, to worship him as a god.
He's aloof, he's giant, and he's godlike.
Yes, he's superhuman. He is superhuman.
It's not just Americans who do this, folks. The entire Western world idolizes greatness. Even beyond the Western world, even the poorer, black and brown parts of the world think that to be great is more excellent than to be good. Sure, sometimes we humans do pay lip service to the poverty and humble origins of Jesus. But this is quickly forgotten by the silver and gold of Christmas bells and lavish dinners. So we usually breeze past all that poverty stuff to yap about Jesus the Great One, even as a baby, receiving magi and their expensive royal gifts, and how the Christmas baby Jesus is the most outstanding figure in human history. In fact, when we Western Christians do talk about Jesus and his life on earth, it sounds a lot like we're talking about a celebrity, eerily so. But as the late great biblical scholar Father John Meyer told me personally over a decade ago, in the first century world, Jesus wasn't a blip on the radar screen of history. Yeah, Jesus began a movement, and yeah, it attracted a good number of followers. But it was tiny in comparison to far more popular messianic hopefuls and charismatic figures contemporary with Jesus, John the Baptist being one major example. But we don't talk about that, do we? Why? Well, it's because neither John the Baptist nor any of these other charismatic figures received imperial endorsement centuries later. See? The gospel writers were urban elite authors, representing maybe 2% of the total population that could read and write. They didn't know peasant life in Galilee. And they lived generations after non-urban Jesus. Folks, these evangelists were urban elites. They were scribes trained to spin. They weren't deceivers, but literary painters who made the subject of their art shine like gold in the noonday sun. Enemies of their communities all knew the historical Jesus' lowly social status. They knew that Jesus was a Galilean nothing person from nothing place Nazareth, and that he shamefully acted in ways peasants wouldn't dare do. And he was treated expectedly and accordingly for doing so, crushed by the elites. And worse still, the enemies of the Jesus groups remembered also that even as a peasant nobody among other lowly peasant nobodies, Jesus was despised as a bastard whose association embarrassed them. They all knew about the shameful origins of his mother's pregnancy. Even centuries after Constantine, the Quran remembers this. So, like Bonacera in The Godfather, the evangelists used all their training, all their powers, and all their skills to polish Jesus, to make him shine golden, to make him sparkle, and to explain these false and insulting perceptions away. They hyperbolized and exaggerated just how popular Jesus was, blowing up the attendance records. The first true Christian theologian, Origen, fiercely defended his understanding of Jesus against the philosopher Celsus, going point for point against Celsus' insulting claims about Jesus. But Origen never contested what Celsus claimed of what Jesus did most days of his ministry in the Galilean villages he frequented, namely, beg for food and donations for his followers, or that Jesus had an impoverished appearance and filthy rags for clothing. Why did Origen not counter these points? Because unlike Celsus' other claims, Origen knew this was undisputably true, and everyone who knew anything about Jesus in Origen's day knew it also. After Constantine, though, such depictions of Jesus often become unimaginable through church history. Not always. Yes, I'm looking at you, St. Francis of Assisi. Not always, but often. But even despite Franciscan reforms, Jesus throughout the centuries constantly is depicted as a popular figure, drawing masses to his person even when he's depicted as poor, and usually poor in a romantic way. The same thing can be said for how Jesus is imagined by many winners attending United States posh and well-fed, well-dressed parishes, with swank sacristies, full of people ready to lead parish action committees and ministries, meeting in lavish rectories and parish halls.
It is very clear that some of the references to Jesus that are in Josephus have been embellished by later Christians. And when scholars first discovered that, their reaction was, we can't take any of it seriously. There is pretty much agreement now that there is a layer in Josephus of stuff that is genuinely Josephus and not additions by later Christians. There are also two Roman writers who refer to Jesus, Tacitus and the historian Suetonius. Their knowledge of who Jesus is a little weird, but Tacitus, for example, knows the story of the crucifixion of Jesus. So there are a few.
What years did they write?
Tacitus is in the 1st century, Suetonius in the 2nd. What Tacitus says is that Jesus was executed as a Roman criminal. Josephus also talks about John the Baptist. But the references are very few. And at first that people said, oh my gosh, why is that the case? But folks, you got to remember, this was a really minor phenomenon in antiquity. It attracted, for a century, it attracted the attention of very few people. Let me just put that in perspective for you. If we had been doing this 50 years ago, scholars would have told you that their estimate was that around the year 100, there were maybe 100,000 Christians in the Roman Empire that had a population of 20 to 30 million. That was wildly exaggerated. Probably a better estimate is that by the year 100 there were maybe 5,000 to 6,000 Christians. Yeah, so it's a very, very tiny phenomenon that it did not begin to attract attention for almost 100 years. Maybe even more than that. So it's not surprising. It's